Welcome everyone to Current in 30, the 30-minute webinar series brought to you by the Current Consulting Group. We are thrilled to have you with us. To briefly introduce this series, each session is designed to keep you informed, efficient, and ahead of the curve. On the second and fourth Mondays of each month throughout 2026, we'll break down key things you need to know about workplace drug screening, from emerging trends and regulatory updates to best practices and practical implementation tips. If you missed our previous sessions, please visit our website, currentconsultinggroup.com, or our YouTube channel at Current Consulting Group to view those sessions. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Greta Walsh of the Current Consulting Group, and today's presentation is titled, What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana, the Book. This presentation qualifies for half of a professional development credit from SHRM and HRCI for those who attend today's presentation in its entirety. Today's presentation welcomes the founder and president of the Current Consulting Group, Bill Current. Among Bill's many accomplishments, he founded the Current Consulting Group in 1998. He is a former VP of Consulting at Employee Information Services. He is a former executive director of the American Council for Drug Education. He is a former director of the Institute for a Drug-Free Workplace, and he has authored 11 books on substance abuse prevention and drug testing. He is also currently a member of the Board of Directors at Endesa and Board of Trustees at the Endesa Foundation. And now it is my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Bill Current from the Current Consulting Group.
Thank you very much, Greta, and welcome everyone to today's Current in 30 webinar. As Greta mentioned, we do these twice a month, and if you're missing any, or if you've missed any past episodes, just go to our website at currentconsultinggroup.com or to our YouTube channel, and you can find past episodes of Current in 30, and you can also find past episodes of our podcast, Currently Speaking. So at either one of those sites, we'd love to get feedback from you. And if you have any suggestions for topics that you would like us to cover in the webinars or in our podcasts, please just email us and let us know. We would love to get some feedback on that so that we're touching on the issues that are most important to the people that we work with in this industry. So thank you for joining us, and we welcome your input. And you're probably aware, Current Consulting Group does a lot of things, some of which I'm going to touch on today during today's presentation, but you can see it here on the screen. I won't go through any of this, but if there are any ways in which we can help you providing compliance services or marketing support services, please let us know. That's what we're here for. Now, this is the outline for today's presentation. I recently wrote a book, my 11th book, called What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana, and today's webinar title is The Book, and we're going to go through some of the contents in the book, but I'm going to share a lot of really valuable information on the subject of marijuana. And so it's not just a plug for the book, but for anybody who sticks with us through the entire presentation, we're going to give you a free copy of the book. Now, it's an electronic book. It does cost, but if you're on today's webinar, you're going to get a free copy if you stay for the whole webinar presentation. We'd be happy to share that with you. And tell other people about it as well. I think you're going to find it very interesting. We took a very different approach to this book. And as I go through different parts, you may have questions. So put those in the Q&A function as well, and we'll get to those questions. Anything we don't get to today, because we only have 30 minutes, we will answer in an email to you. So let's start. Section 1, What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana, the book. This is the title of the book, What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history as to what led up to writing this book. So years ago, as Greta mentioned, I was the director of the Institute for Drug-Free Workplace. It was originally part of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and then later we spun off and became an independent organization. While I was there, I wrote 2 books, A Guide to State Drug Testing Laws and Legislation, and then a book that really sort of put my career on the path that it's been on for the last 30 years, Does Drug Testing Work? The purpose of the Guide to State Drug Testing Laws and Legislation was to give employers and sort of the new drug testing industry. It was very new at that time in 1991 when that book came out, to give them a source they could go to find information about state laws. And at that time, there were about 16 state drug testing laws, 16 states with drug testing laws. Today, of course, there are hundreds and hundreds, but back then it was pretty easy. I had them all memorized. And so when members of the Institute for a Drug-Free Workplace would call with questions, I could typically answer it just off the top of my head. But we wrote this book so everybody would have that information, because as I said, there was no other source for it, and there were only 16 laws at the time. There was legislation constantly, but not a lot. We wrote the book and it became very popular. And then I wrote Does Drug Testing Work? Because at that time, there was a lot of misinformation about drug testing, a lot of falsehoods that were being spread about drug testing, its accuracy, its legality, etc., whether it worked or not, from an ROI standpoint. And so a lot of stats were being thrown around, and people were using the same stats to make conflicting arguments. So I wrote Does Drug Testing Work? Where I put all of these studies and reports and surveys into one source with all the citations so that you could go to the sources and find out what it actually said. And that book became very popular. We had case studies in it, we had a lot of great information in it. Today, things have changed quite a bit. So it would be almost impossible to publish a book about state drug testing laws because it would be out of date the minute it rolled off the presses. So what we did is we created Current Compliance, which is an online database of state drug testing laws. And over the last, say, 12, 15 years, we've been adding tons and tons of information to our database on a state-by-state basis for the existing marijuana laws and the new marijuana laws and the changes to existing marijuana laws, because it's just constantly in flux. Back in 1991, when I wrote a guide to state drug testing laws, there were 16 states that had drug testing laws. Today, there are literally hundreds of laws, case law, workers' comp and unemployment comp regulations that affect drug testing, and of course today, marijuana laws. Our database has all of that information on a state-by-state basis, as well as the citations, so you can go right to the source of the statute and look up the information for yourself if you'd like to, because that's really the only way to do it. We literally keep that database up to date every week. And right now, there is so much misinformation about marijuana and its effect on the workplace and what employers' rights are when it comes to drug testing and acting on a positive drug test result, that I felt there was a need to write a book that had all of this information in there, because there are just so many questions that employers have and so many questions that drug testing providers have that they're getting on an almost daily basis from their customers, that I felt like there was a need for this. And so I wrote the book. Now, the book is, I think, very easy to read. You'll find specific information you need in a very easy to follow format. We put everything in Q&A format. Every chapter starts with a question, and then the contents of each chapter are questions with answers. So let me go back to the previous slide. So I think it's very easy to read, very easy to follow, and every answer we give is fully cited. You'll find the reference to the source that we use to answer the question throughout the book. There are just hundreds of endnotes in the book for each chapter. So you'll find that very easy to use, very easy to read, and very easy to go back to find information that you need to answer customers' questions or an HR manager's question, etc. Now, the book is published in electronic format at this point. That makes it very accessible and also very affordable. Our objective here was to get this book out to lots and lots of people, and we decided that that was the most economical way to provide it to the industry and to employers. You can find it, you will be able to find it on Amazon Books. As of this moment, as we're recording this webinar, it's just a couple of weeks from being posted. We're going to be releasing the book during the NDASA conference at the end of April. So if you're listening to this podcast or to this webinar after April 2026, it's available. It's on Amazon, it'll be available through our website, etc. Okay. I like to think the book was presented in a very balanced way. Lots of fact-based issues were addressed and covered. on the issue of marijuana, drug testing for marijuana, and all the things that would prompt or inspire, motivate an employer to want to test for marijuana. It's all in there, fully cited, and we present it in a balanced way. I will say that as a drug testing expert, if you will, I'm in favor of employers testing for marijuana. They have the right to do that, and we make that case in the book. But I understand that some people who read the book or hear about the book will not be in favor of testing for marijuana. Maybe they're in favor of legalization of marijuana and they're against drug testing. I understand the book's not intended to convince you to believe in drug testing for marijuana, but hopefully you'll find it, presented in a very balanced way so that every claim that we make, every answer to every question is fully cited. So it's not just my opinion, but it's cited back to a source that you can go to and look at for yourself to find the exact information. So back to the table of contents, you'll find that these are the chapters. There are 8 chapters. There's a foreword and an afterword, but there's 8 chapters. Each chapter, as I said, begins with a question. Marijuana, what's the big deal? Should employers test for marijuana? Can employers test for marijuana? That's the legal part of it. How can employers test for marijuana? The actual drug testing methodologies that are out there and how they perform when testing for marijuana. How can employers address marijuana in their drug testing policy? You've got to have a marijuana section in your policy. We have a whole chapter on that. What's the return on investment when testing for marijuana? We lay that all out in great detail. And then because this always comes up, we included a chapter called, Isn't Marijuana Just Like Alcohol? Of course, we refute that with facts. But that's an issue that comes up all the time. You'll find a whole chapter answering that question. And then kind of a catch-all at the end with chapter 8, what else should employers know about marijuana? A lot of really interesting information in that chapter that didn't necessarily fit anywhere else in the book, but that we thought was very important for employers to have access to that information. So we put it all in chapter 8. Now, I'm very proud and pleased to be able to say that Joe McGuire, the executive director of the National Drug and Alcohol Screening Association, NDASA, where I sit on the board of directors, Joe McGuire wrote a foreword for the book. And so I'm very proud of that, very pleased. Thank you, Joe, for doing that. It lends a lot of credibility to our effort. Joe is easily one of the foremost experts on the marijuana issue in the United States today. She's a very popular speaker at conferences, not just in the United States, but in other parts of the world as well, where she speaks on this subject. She knows probably more about it than anybody else. And I just wanted to share an excerpt from her foreword right here. So I'm just going to read what Joe wrote here. The employer approach to employ marijuana use is undoubtedly complicated. As legalization becomes the accepted norm, there's growing confusion about whether or not this subject should even matter to an employer who finds the whole topic confusing, frustrating, and threatening should they misstep. Many companies risk safety every day without counting the cost because it seems easier not to know. The hard truth is that every employer has a responsibility to protect the vulnerable from harm from those who choose substances over safety. The workplace zero tolerance policy should be a preserved and respected practice with common sense approaches that hold life more dear than a recreational high. That's just an excerpt from the foreword that Joe provided for the book. Thank you again, Joe, for doing that. I think you'll find, if you go to NDASA's website, you'll find a lot of other great information about this subject, and you can follow Joe McGuire there as well. And I encourage you to do that. And if you're not a member of NDASA, I highly encourage you to join NDASA. It's well worth the minor investment that it takes to become a member. Now, in the book, there's an introduction, and I presented reasons why I believe marijuana is the most dangerous drug on the face of the planet today. Now, that may seem like hyperbole to you, but I provide some very well documented facts. These are 5 reasons why I believe that. I think it is by far the most widely used illicit drug throughout the world. There's lots of evidence to that fact, and its use is causing many opportunities to wreak havoc on families, society, and certainly the workplace. Number 2, the percentage of people who say they use marijuana is increasing. There's plenty of documentation on that. The percentage of people who consider it harmful to use marijuana is decreasing. That's also part of this study that comes out, or a survey that comes out every year from the federal government, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. Number 4, Many people freely admit that they use marijuana on their way to work or while on the job on a regular basis. And 5, its impairing effects can last for many hours, well past the point at which a person or a user no longer feels intoxicated. So there are 5 reasons why I think it's the most dangerous drug in the world. But here's 5 more. Marijuana using employees are less safe than their non-using coworkers, as evidenced by the fact that marijuana-related post-accident positive drug test results recently reached a 25-year high, according to the Quest Annual Drug Testing Index. 7, despite claims to the contrary, it is addictive, and it's very difficult to kick that addiction once it sets in. 8, it's physically and mentally harmful to the user in many scientifically documented ways, and that can affect their performance in the workplace. There is far more misinformation circulated about marijuana than any other drug by far. And then finally, too many employers are confused about the dangerous effects of marijuana on their workplaces and have already dropped marijuana from their drug testing policy, or they're considering doing it. Every year at the Current Consulting Group, we conduct a survey of the drug testing industry, which we'll release at the NDASA conference. And later in the year, we do a survey of employers, which we release at the SAPA conference. And we find that the number of employers that are dropping marijuana from their programs is increasing, not dramatically, but it's increasing every year by a little bit. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that there's so much misinformation that is leading employers to come to the conclusion that it's not legal to test for marijuana where they are, it's too costly to test for marijuana, too great a risk of lawsuits and things of that nature. I address all of those issues in the book, and all of these reasons and others are why I wrote the book in the first place. So let me give you an example. Let's see. In chapter 2, we ask the question, should employers test for marijuana? And this is where we make the case, presenting factual information from very reputable sources. And these are the questions that we asked in this chapter. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but there are questions like these that are part of the table of contents in every chapter. And as we go through each chapter, we start with the retelling of a major workplace drug incident. Chapter 2 starts with the retelling of the 1987 Amtrak Conrail train crash that ended up killing 14 passengers and 2 Amtrak employees. And we go through all the details of that. And that incident, incidentally, is what really led to what we know as the DOT drug and alcohol testing regulations today, as they exist today. That was a tragic accident in 1987 that cost people their lives, but it was a true thing that happened. And a lot of this stuff is gotten forgotten in our industry and by employers. So I retell something like this at the beginning of every chapter. And then we get into the questions. So one of the questions we ask in this chapter is, do most employers test for marijuana? And as I state, the good news is yes, but we're seeing a trend. And that trend is starting to see a diminishing percentage of employers that are actually testing for marijuana. If you go to the third bullet, when asked in our survey, what is your company's position on testing for marijuana? 74%, down from 77% in 2023 and 2024, said we plan to continue testing for marijuana. So 20 years ago, that would have been 100% probably that we're testing for marijuana. But today, it's 74%, and it's down slightly from the last previous years. I think the reduction in marijuana testing is in large part due to the growing number of states across the country that have legalized marijuana use, obviously, right? But I also think it has a lot to do with just the massive amount of misinformation that's out there, and it's confusing to employers. We also ask in that chapter, why do employers conduct drug testing? Understanding why an employer conducts drug testing helps to educate employers and drug testing providers as to why it's important to test for marijuana. So when we asked this question of employers in our 2025 survey, 78% said the reason they conduct drug testing is to promote workplace safety. That's the #1 reason by far, 78%. And then 50% said to minimize legal risks, and 44% said to hire the best possible job candidates. It's interesting to note that when we asked what are the benefits that you get out of drug testing, 84% in the same survey said they believe drug testing works, that it is helping them maintain a safer workplace. When you juxtapose that with the percentages of people or the numbers of people who are using marijuana today in the United States, who admit to using marijuana on their commute to work in the morning, or who admit to using marijuana at some point during the work day. If your motivation is safety, then you really owe it to yourself, to the majority of your employees who are not marijuana users, and to your clients and customers, etc., to test for marijuana. We make those points in the book and in this chapter. And then we end every chapter with next steps, things that you can do based on the information we provided in this chapter to help you make progress in this area. So number one, determine what your drug testing objectives are as a company so that you're putting together a drug testing program designed to achieve those objectives, okay? And I won't go through all of these. You're gonna get these slides in the recording, but every chapter ends with suggested next steps. And then also, as I mentioned, there are endnotes for every chapter where you'll find all the information that you need to look up these sources on your own if you want to do that. We provide not only where it came from, but a URL so that you can just, cut and paste it into your search engine and go straight to the source. And there are lots and lots of endnotes at the end of every chapter. Now, at the very end of the book, we provide an afterword. And as part of the afterword, I tell the story about a book called Competing Against Luck, which was written by Clayton M. Christensen and some of his associates on a theory or approach to building your business called the jobs to be done theory. And they wrote this book called Competing Against Luck based on the jobs to be done theory. And I read this book years ago, read it a number of times, shared it with many customers and employees, etc. I really believe in the philosophy that's presented in this book. And I use that as the basis for the afterword, where we make the case that if you're an employer out there who's not convinced that they should do drug testing for marijuana, then you really have to ask yourself, what's the objective? What am I trying to accomplish? What job would I be hiring testing for marijuana to do? And I asked that question throughout the writing of this book. Here's what I conclude. The marijuana problem is not going away, and if left unaddressed, its impact on the workplace will definitely result in all kinds of negative consequences. To ignore the marijuana issue if you're an employer is a classic example of trying to compete against luck. As you read the book, you'll put those pieces together. The third bullet, put it another way, it's hoping you're the 1 out of 100 employers who eliminates testing for marijuana, but by sheer luck, really, never hires a chronic marijuana user. We know that as companies drop pre-employment testing for marijuana, they see a corresponding increase in accidents and post-accident positivity from drug testing for marijuana. So if you drop marijuana from your drug testing panel, especially for pre-employment testing, you're going to hire more marijuana users. There's just no way around it. And if you're in a safety-sensitive industry, you're going to see an increase in accidents and probably workers' compensation claims as well. All of that is fully cited in the book. So testing for marijuana is a job that I think every employer needs to fill, but certainly if you're in a safety-sensitive industry. Now, as I mentioned, I keep having a little delay here. As I mentioned, you'll be able to find the book on Amazon. You'll also be able to find a link to getting the book on our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. This is the cover of the book. I'm gonna say coming soon, but as we record this Current in 30 webinar, we're really just days away from it being publicly available. We'll also be announcing it at the NDASA conference, and anybody on today's webinar who would like a copy of the book, thank you for sticking it out and staying for the whole webinar presentation. I know it sounded a little bit like a sales pitch, but you're going to get the book for free. So I'm not much of a salesperson if I'm giving it away for free, but it's only for those who attended today's webinar. So thank you for joining us. I'm gonna conclude this by putting up our information here and our information about our next session, which is on April 27th with Yvette Farnsworth Baker Esquire, where she'll be talking about marijuana, but specifically from a policy standpoint. I think you'll find it very interesting. You don't want to miss that. If you would like more information about Current Consulting Group, go to our website at currentconsultinggroup.com. You can read about all the compliance and marketing support services that we provide. And any questions that you have about the marijuana issue, about drug testing in general, about state laws, etc., just put it in the Q&A function, and we'll provide an email response to your questions. And we hope that you'll join us again in future webinars as well, especially on April 27th with Yvette Baker. So with that, Greta, let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to everyone joining us for today's edition of Current in 30. We hope that today's insights from Bill's new book help you stay informed and confident in your workplace drug screening decisions. And don't forget to check back with us at currentconsultinggroup.com for more information on its official release and where you can get it. As a reminder, this presentation was recorded, and you will receive instructions in a few days informing you how to access the recording. Additionally, this presentation qualified for half of a professional development credit from SHRM and HRCI for those who attended today's presentation in its entirety. If you have met that requirement, you will be emailed those activity IDs. Remember, we'll be back every second and fourth Monday of 2026 with things you need to know to stay current in this industry. Be sure to follow the Current Consulting Group and check your inbox for upcoming session details. Until next time, stay current and have a great day.